They tied me to a tree at the border of lichen territory, a sacrifice wrapped in silk, perfumed with fear, left to be taken by the monster they were too cowardly to face. I was 17 years old when my alpha sold me like livestock to save his own skin. The rope bit into my wrists until blood ran down my arms, and I remember thinking, this is how I die. Not in battle, not in the arms of a mate, but as currency, as bait, as something disposable. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been keeping a secret so dangerous it would have gotten me killed long before the lichens ever came. And when that secret finally broke free, their regret became my revenge. Hey, you. Yeah, you. The one scrolling through story after story, looking for something that actually makes you feel something. The one who knows what it's like to be the last one chosen, the first one sacrificed, the one everyone forgets until they need something from you. This story isn't just about werewolves and alphas and territory wars. This story is about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you become the people you need protection from. So sit down, get comfortable, and whatever you do, don't blink, because Zarya's story starts in the dark, and it doesn't let go until the very last word. But before we dive into the darkness, if you live for stories that wreck you emotionally, tailies with possessive alphas, deadly secrets hidden behind every glance, and romantic tension so thick you could choke on it, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like so more readers can find this story and share it with someone who needs to feel something real today. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single word of what happens next. Part 1. The Offering. Blood does not make a pack. Loyalty does. And my pack had none to give me. The moon hung low and swollen over Blackamoor territory, a yellowed eye watching the forest with ancient indifference. The air smelled of pine, and damp earth, and something else, something metallic that coated the back of my throat like old copper. Fear. Not mine though. Not yet. I stood with my back against the rough bark of a boundary oak, my wrists bound behind me with silver-woven rope that bit into my skin with every shallow breath I took. The silver didn't burn me the way it burned others. Another secret I kept buried so deep even my own heartbeat didn't betray it, but the rope was tight enough to stop circulation. My fingers had gone numb an hour ago. An hour. That was how long I'd been standing here, waiting to die. No, not waiting. Offered. The word tasted wrong in my mouth, like spoiled meat. Because offerings were sacred things, weren't they? Gifts given to something greater, something worthy. The old stories spoke of offerings made with reverence, with honor, with the full weight of a people's gratitude and fear. This was none of those things. This was my alpha, Declan Blackwood, standing 30 feet away with his beta and his gamma, flanking him like soldiers too, ashamed to meet the eyes of the prisoner they were about to execute. His arms were crossed over his broad chest, his jaw set in that way that used to make me think he was handsome, commanding, worthy. Now I knew better. Now I knew that Declan Blackwood was a coward wearing an Alpha's mantle like a stolen coat, and I was the price he was willing to pay to keep it. They'll come at moonrise, Declan said. Not to me, never to me, not anymore, but to his beta, a hulking wolf named Marcus, who had once ruffled my hair when I was 8 years old and called me Little Shadow, because I followed him everywhere. Marcus didn't look at me now. His eyes were fixed on the tree line, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. The Lichen King doesn't negotiate, Marcus said. He takes what he wants. That's what the scouts reported. Then he'll take her. Declan's voice was flat, clinical. And maybe he'll be satisfied enough to leave our borders alone for another season. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shift so badly that my bones ached with it, my wolf clawing at the inside of my ribs like a caged thing begging to be let out. But I didn't, because if I shifted they would know. They would smell it on me, the thing I had been hiding since I was 12 years old. The thing that made me less than nothing in their eyes. The thing that would have had me put down, like a sick pup if anyone had ever discovered it. So I stood, silent, bound, waiting, and I watched the moon rise. The hierarchy of our world is simple, or so the elders teach. 3 kinds of wolves walk the earth, and each knows their place. The first are the pack wolves, those born into territory, into family, into the rigid structure of alpha, beta, gamma, delta, omega. Every wolf knows their rank by their scent, by the way their wolf submits or stands tall when faced with another. It is written in our blood, our bones, our very souls. The second are the rose wolves without packs, without territory, without law. They are the outcasts, the criminals, the ones who chose freedom over structure and paid for it with their humanity. Most rogues die within their first year. The ones who survive are either monsters or miracles, and it's usually safer to assume the former. And the third are the lichens. The lichens are what we become when we stop pretending to be human. Where pack wolves walk on 2 legs and run on 4, lichens have never left the wild behind. They are bigger, stronger, older, more wolf than any pack wolf could ever hope to be. Their alpha, their king, is said to be something out of legend. A creature who has lived for centuries. A wolf who answers to no law but his own. A monster who has torn apart more packs than there are stars in the sky. That was who they were giving me to. That was who I was supposed to be bait for. Maybe he'll keep her, Gamma Corbin muttered, and I felt my stomach turn. Corbin was young, barely 20, with the kind of cruel handsomeness that made the unmated females whisper and giggle. He had never looked at me twice, not unless it was to sneer at the Omega's mark on my file or to make some comment about how a wolf with no scent was barely a wolf at all. No scent. That was the first clue, wasn't it? The thing that should have tipped them off years ago. Wolves have scents unique, individual, as identifying as a fingerprint. Pack wolves smell like their territory, like their pack, like their rank and their history and their heart. You can read a wolf's entire life in their scent if you know how. I had no scent. Never had. Not a trace. Not a whisper. The pack healers had called it a defect when I was born. A mutation. A failure of my wolf to properly manifest. They had tested my blood, my saliva, my sweat, and found nothing. No pack marker. No territorial imprint. No identity. I was a ghost walking among wolves, and they had tolerated me only because my mother had been beloved, and because Declan's father, the old alpha, the good alpha, had made them promise to protect me. When he lay dying of the wasting sickness that had no cure. Protect the girl. Alpha Ronan had said, his hand on my 7-year-old head, his eyes already clouding with the death that would take him before the next moon. She is pack. She is yours, swear it. And they had sworn. And then Ronan had died, and Declan had taken the mantle, and the promise had rotted in their mouths like meat left too long in the sun. Because I wasn't pack. Not really. I was a defect, a curiosity, a mouth to feed and a body to house, an A. Reminder of a promise made to A. Dead man who couldn't hold them to it anymore. And now I was bait. You should have run, my wolf whispered, her voice thin and reedy from years of being suppressed. You should have run when you had the chance. And gone where? I asked her silently. I have no pack scent, no territory. No way to survive as a rogue. I would have been dead in a week. Better dead on your feet than dead on your knees. She snarled. But she didn't shift. She didn't force the change that would reveal everything. She was as trapped as I was, bound by the same fear, the same secrets, the same desperate hope that maybe the Lichen King would just kill me quickly. The moon reached its zenith, and the forest went silent. I felt him before I saw him. It's impossible to explain to someone who has never lived as a wolf, never known what it means to have senses that stretch beyond the physical. To feel the weight of a predator's attention like a physical pressure against your skin. But I felt him, a presence so vast, so old, so utterly without mercy that my wolf went silent inside me, not in rebellion but in submission. Not to me. To him. He stepped out of the tree line, like the night itself had given birth to something ancient and terrible. I had heard stories about lichens, of course. Every pack wolf grows up on them. The bedtime tailies used to frighten pups into obedience. The warnings whispered around fires when the moon was full and the border patrols were doubled. Lichens are bigger than wolves. Lichens are stronger. Lichens don't follow pack law, don't honor territory, don't care about anything, except taking what they want and destroying what they don't. The stories didn't do him justice. He was massive, easily 7 feet tall in his human form, his shoulders broad enough to block out the moon behind him. His hair was black as oil, slicked back from a face that looked like it had been carved from mountain stone and then left to weather for 1,000 years. His eyes were gold, not brown that looked gold in certain light, but gold liquid, molten, burning with an inner fire that made me want to look away and couldn't. He was shirtless despite the cold, his chest a map of scars so old they had faded to silver lines against bronze skin. His hands were bare, his feet silent on the fallen leaves, and he moved like something that had never learned to be afraid of anything, in this world or the next. Behind him, the tree line rustled with the presence of others. His pack, his army, but they didn't step forward. They didn't need to. He was enough. He was always enough. Declan stepped forward, and I saw his hand tremble. Saw Marcus take a half step back. Saw Corbin's face go pale as milk. Lichen King, Declan said, and his voice cracked on the title. We offer you peace. A gift. A token of. The Lichen King's gaze slid past Declan like he wasn't there. Like none of them were there. Like the only living thing in the entire forest was me, bound and bleeding and waiting. His nostrils flared. And then, for the first time in 1,000 years of life, or so the stories said, the Lichen King's face changed. His eyes narrowed. His head tilted. His lips parted slightly, and I saw the length of his canines, white as bone, sharp as knives. "What?" he said, and his voice was low and rough and utterly without emotion. "Is that?" He wasn't looking at Declan. He was looking at me. Declan stumbled over his words, trying to reclaim control of a situation that had slipped through his fingers the moment the king stepped into the clearing. She's an offering. A gift, we thought. You thought, the king interrupted, and his voice was still calm, still flat. But something in the air changed, pressurized. Dangerous. You thought to bring me a wolf with no scent. A wolf with no pack mark. A wolf who doesn't exist in any territory record, any bloodline, any world I have ever known. He took a step toward me, and Declan didn't stop him. Marcus didn't stop him. No one stopped him. He walked past the alpha like Declan was furniture, past the beta and the gamma like they were trees in a forest he had walked 1,000 times before. And then he was standing in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his skin, close enough that I could smell him smoke and pine and something older, something that had no name in any language I knew. He reached out, and I flinched. His fingers caught my chin, held it, tilting my face up to the moonlight, to his gaze, to the impossible weight of his attention. "You're not afraid," he said. Not a question. A statement. An observation delivered with the same clinical detachment a healer might use when noting a symptom. "I've been afraid my whole life," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "And too tired to keep doing it." Something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been surprise. Something that might have been interest. Behind me, I heard Declan clear his throat. "Your Grace, if she's not to your liking, we can." The king's head turned. Just slightly. just enough to pin Declan in place with a look that could have frozen fire. "Your offering," he said softly, "is not a gift." He looked back at me. His thumb brushed across my jaw, and I felt something inside me shift, something deep and buried and forgotten, something I had locked away so long ago. I had almost convinced myself it didn't exist. "You," the Lycan King said, "are a revelation." And then he leaned down, and his lips brushed against my ear, and he whispered 5 words that would change everything. "Do you know what you are?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because in that moment, with his breath warm, against my skin and his scent, filling my lungs and his presence, pressing against every wall I had ever built around myself, I felt my secret begin to crack. The scent I had never had, the scent that should have marked me as pack, as territory, as someone began to bleed through my skin. And the Lycan King inhaled it like a man dying of thirst finding water in the desert. His body went rigid. His grip on my chin tightened. And when he pulled back to look at me, his golden eyes had gone dark with something I had never seen before. Something that looked like hunger. Something that looked like recognition. "Declan," the king said, and his voice was no longer calm. It was rough. It was shaking. It was the sound of a predator who had just realized that the prey it had been hunting was something else entirely. "You brought me a wolf with no scent. A wolf with no pack. A wolf who doesn't exist in any record." He turned to face my alpha, and the movement was slow, deliberate, terrible. "You brought me the one thing I have been searching for 300 years. Declan's face went white. I don't understand." "No," the king said. "You don't." He looked at me again, and for the first time I saw something human in his face. Something almost fragile. Something that looked like hope or grief, or some combination of both that had no name. "There hasn't been a female Lycan born in 5 centuries, he said quietly. "Not one. We thought the bloodline had died out. We thought we were the last." His hand moved from my chin to my cheek, and the gentleness of the gesture made my chest ache with something I couldn't name. "But you're not Pack, are you? You're not Wolf. You're not any of the things they told you were." His thumb traced the line of my cheekbone, and I felt my wolf stir, not in fear, not in submission, but in something that felt terrifyingly like recognition. "You're Lycan," he said. "You're mine." Behind me, Declan made a sound like a man who had just realized he had signed his own death warrant. I didn't look at him. I couldn't look away from the king. "You're wrong," I whispered, but even as I said it, I felt the truth of his words settling into my bones like something that had always been there, waiting to be named. "I can't be. I'm nothing. I'm a defect. A wolf with no scent. An omega who can't even—" "You're not an omega," he said, and there was iron in his voicemail. Command. Certainty. You never were. The reason you have no pack scent is because your Lycan blood rejected the bond. The reason you have no territory is because your wolf was waiting for a territory that didn't exist anymore." He leaned closer, and his eyes burned into mine. "You are the last female Lycan. Every wolf who has ever looked at you and seen weakness, every alpha who dismissed you, every packmate who shunned you, every person who made you feel like you were less than nothing." His smile was a terrible thing, beautiful and merciless and utterly without pity. They were looking at the most dangerous creature in this world, and they were too blind to see it. He reached behind me, and the silver rope snapped like thread. My arms fell forward, blood rushing back into my hands in a wave of pins and needles, and I would have fallen if he hadn't caught me, one arm around my waist, pulling me against his chest, holding me up like I weighed nothing at all. "You come with me," he said, and it wasn't a request. "You come with me, and you learn what you are. You learn what you can become." He looked over my head at Declan, at Marcus, at Corbin, at the pack that had tied me to a tree and left me to die. "And when you're ready," he said softly, "you can decide what to do with the people who thought you were disposable." I should have been afraid. I should have been screaming, fighting, running. But all I could feel was the weight of his arm around my waist, the heat of his body against mine, the impossible truth of his words settling into my chest like a key turning in a lock. Lycan, female. His. I looked at Declan, at the alpha who had sold me, at the pack that had watched, at the people who had made me believe I was nothing, and I felt something cold and sharp and right unfurl in my chest. "Okay," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "Take me home." The Lycan King smiled. And the last thing I saw, before he pulled me into the darkness of the forest, was the look on Declan's face, the dawning horror, the sudden understanding, the terror of a man who had just realized that the nothing he had thrown away was actually the everything he could never get back. End of part 1. What is Zarya? And why has the Lycan King been searching for her for 300 years? The answer will change everything you think you know about this world. In part 2, the Lycan King takes Zarya to his territory, where she discovers that being claimed by a monster might be the only thing that saves her humanity, and that the secrets of her past are far darker than she ever imagined. Don't miss a single word. Hey, if this story is hitting you the way I think it is, if you're feeling that fire in your chest, that need to know what happens next, then do me a favor. Like this story. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're invested. Share it with someone who needs to read it. Someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated. Someone who's waiting for their own revelation. And subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Because trust me, you don't want to be anywhere else when Zarya walks into the Lycan King's territory and sees what she's really worth. The story is just beginning. Part 2. The Kingdom of Monsters. The Lycans did not welcome me. They did not bow. They did not celebrate the return of their last female. They looked at me with the same eyes my pack had used, calculating, suspicious, hungry. But where my pack saw weakness, the Lycans saw something far more dangerous. They saw a threat. And threats, in the Kingdom of Monsters, are eliminated before they can grow. The forest swallowed us whole. I had spent my entire life in the woods of Blackamoor territory, had walked every trail, knew every stream and ridge and hollow by heart. But the moment the Lycan King pulled me past the boundary line, the world changed. The trees grew taller here, older, their branches twisted together, overhead like clasped hands, blocking out the moon until only slivers of silver light pierced the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of moss and rotten something else, something that made my Wolf whine low in my chest, a sound I had never heard her make before. "Ancient," she whispered. "This place is ancient." The king moved through the darkness like he was born to it, his grip on my arm firm but not painful, his pace relentless. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my legs still numb from standing bound for so long. But he didn't slow. Didn't ask if I was all right. Didn't seem to care that I was half frozen, half starved, and running on nothing but adrenaline and terror. I opened my mouth to say something, to demand answers, to beg for a moment's rest, to scream at him for dragging me into this nightmare. And then I saw the lights. They flickered through the trees like willow wisps, dozens of them, hundreds, moving in patterns that had no rhythm I could discern. Torches, I realized after a moment. Not electric lights. Not the lanterns we used in Blackamoor. Torches, burning with flames that cast long shadows and turned the forest into a cathedral of darkness and fire. And beneath the torches, eyes. Dozens of eyes. Hundreds. Watching us from the darkness between the trees, from the branches overhead, from the ground beneath the fallen leaves. Eyes of every color, gold and amber, and copper and red, all fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Lycans," my Wolf said, and her voice was barely a whisper now. "So many Lycans." The king didn't acknowledge them. Didn't slow. Didn't so much as glance at the eyes that tracked our every movement. He walked like a man who had never needed to look over his shoulder, never needed to fear what lurked in the shadows, because he was what lurked in the shadows. We emerged into a clearing so vast it could have held the entire Blackamoor Pack compound 3 times over. And in the center of that clearing stood a fortress. No, not a fortress. A mountain. The structure rose from the earth like it had been grown rather than built, its walls made of black stone that seemed to absorb the torchlight rather than reflect it. Towers spiraled upward at impossible angles, connected by bridges that arched across gaps so deep I couldn't see the bottom. A gate loomed before us, tall enough for giants, wide enough for an army, carved with images of wolves and battles and things I didn't have names for. The king stopped at the gate and looked back at me for the first time since we'd entered the forest. "This is my territory," he said. "My pack. My home." His golden eyes swept over me, cataloguing my trembling hands, my shallow breath, the bruises already forming on my wrists where the silver rope had bitten deepest. "You will be tested here. You will be challenged. My wolves do not trust outsiders, and they will trust you least of all." "I'm not an outsider," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "You said I was lichen. I said you carry lichen blood." His voice was flat, clinical again. The warmth I had glimpsed in the clearing, the hunger, the recognition was gone as if it had never existed. "Blood alone does not make you one of us. Blood alone does not earn you a place in my kingdom. You will prove your worth, or you will be cast out. That is the law. Cast out." The words hit me like a physical blow. Cast out to where? To what? I had no pack, no territory, no one who would take me in. If the lichens rejected me, I would be rogue and truth hunted by every pack who saw me as prey, chased by every wolf who smelled the lichen in my blood and wanted it destroyed. I had traded one death sentence for another. The gate began to open, and I felt the weight of what was coming settle over me like a shroud. The courtyard beyond the gate was a war zone. Not in the sense of active battle. There were no bodies, no blood, no weapons drawn, but in the sense of a place that had been prepared for war. Wolves in half shift patrolled the walls, their faces elongated, their claws extended, their eyes scanning the darkness with the focus of soldiers expecting attack. Training grounds stretched across the eastern quarter, filled with lichens sparring with blades and axes and their own transformed hands. The air rang with the clash of metal and the growls of wolves pushing themselves to the edge of their limits and beyond. And everywhere were the eyes. They watched me from every corner, every shadow, every high window and low doorway. Lichens in human form, lichens in wolf form, lichens in forms I didn't have names for. Males, mostly, but I caught glimpses of females too rare, I knew now. So rare that every female lichen was a treasure, a resource, a prize. And I was the first new female in 500 years. The weight of that knowledge settled into my chest like a stone. I had thought foolishly, naively, that being the last female lichen would mean something. That I would be protected, cherished, wanted. That the eyes that watched me weren't warm, weren't welcoming, weren't anything close to kind. They were hungry. Not the hunger of a wolf looking at a mate. Not the hunger of a pack looking at a new member. It was the hunger of wolves looking at something they wanted to consume. The king led me across the courtyard without pausing, without acknowledging the stares, without doing anything to shield me from the weight of 100 predatory gazers. He walked like a man who had never needed to protect anyone because no one had ever been worth protecting. We entered the main keep, and the temperature dropped. The stone walls were thick here, layered with tapestries and furs and the skulls of animals I didn't recognize. Torches flickered in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows that made the painted wolves on the walls seem to move. The air smelled of smoke and old blood, and something that made my wolf press herself against the inside of my ribs. like she was trying to hide. "This place is wrong," she whispered. "We shouldn't be here. We should run." "Run where?" I asked her. "We have nowhere else to go." She didn't answer. She had no answer to give. The king stopped before a door made of black iron, carved with the same images as the gate. He pressed his palm to the center, and the door swung inward without a sound. Beyond it was a room unlike anything I had ever seen. The walls were lined with books, thousands of them, tens of thousands, filling shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling and wrapped around the room in a circle that made the space feel like the inside of a tower. A fire burned in a hearth large enough to roast a deer, casting warm light over a desk piled with maps and scrolls and strange instruments I didn't recognize. Furs covered the floor, thick enough to sink into, soft enough to sleep on. And in the center of the room, waiting with her arms crossed and her face carved from stone, was a woman. She was taller than me by a head, taller than most men I had known, with silver hair braided back from a face that looked like it had been frozen in time somewhere between youth and age. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "You brought it here," she said, and her voice was cold enough to freeze the fire. "After everything I told you, after everything we discussed, you brought the unknown variable into the heart of our territory." "She's not an it," the king said, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before, something almost defensive. "And she's not unknown. She's Lycan. She's unproven." The woman's gaze swept over me, dismissive, contemptuous. "She has no training, no conditioning, no understanding of what she is or what she carries. She's a liability, Leonidas. A weakness that our enemies will exploit the moment they learn she exists." Leonidas. So that was his name. The Lycan King. The monster of 1,000 stories. The creature who had torn apart packs and slaughtered alphas and ruled his kingdom through fear and force for centuries beyond counting. And he had a name. A real name. A human name. A name that made him almost ordinary. Almost. "She's not a liability," Leonidas said, and his voice hardened. "She's the future. The first female born in 5 centuries. The first chance we've had to rebuild what was lost." "Rebuild?" The woman laughed, and there was no humor in it. "She's not a breeder, Leonidas. She's not a broodmare you can use to repopulate the bloodline. She's a person. A person with no loyalty to us, no reason to trust us, and every reason to run the moment we turn our backs." She stepped toward me, and I forced myself not to retreat. Forced myself to meet her eyes, even though every instinct I had was screaming at me to look away, to submit, to hide. "Do you know why the female Lycans died out?" she asked, and her voice was soft now, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying than her anger had been. I shook my head. "Because they were hunted," she said. "Because the packs, the wolves, feared what we could become. Feared the power we carried. Feared that a female Lycan, properly trained, properly awakened, could challenge the entire hierarchy they had built their world on. So they killed us. Every female born, every female discovered, every female who might have grown into something they couldn't control." She reached out, and her fingers touched my cheek. Her skin was cold, colder than any living thing should be, and I shivered under her touch. "You carry the blood of the murdered," she said. "The hope of the hunted. The power of everything they tried to destroy." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something almost like pity in them. "And you don't know a single thing about any of it." She pulled back and turned to Leonidas. 3 months. If she hasn't shifted into her full Lycan form in 3 months, she's not what you think she is. And if she's not what you think she is, then we'll discuss it then," Leonidas said, and there was finality in his voice. A door slamming. A verdict delivered. "For now, she stays." She trains. She learns. And you? He looked at the woman, and for the first time, I saw something like warmth in his expression. You will teach her. Not because I command it, but because she needs someone who understands what she's facing. Someone who survived what she's going to become. The woman's jaw tightened. Her hands clenched at her sides. For a moment, I thought she would refuse, would walk out, would leave me alone with a king who looked at me like I was a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be saved. But then she exhaled a long, slow breath that seemed to take something out of her, and nodded. 3 months, she said. And if she fails, she won't, Leonidas said. And the way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, the unwavering conviction made something shift in my chest. Made something that had been frozen for a very long time begin, slowly, to thaw. He looked at me again, and this time his eyes were different. Softer. Almost. Human. Rest tonight, he said. Tomorrow everything changes. Tomorrow you begin to learn what you really are. He turned and walked toward the door. And I should have let him go. Should have been grateful for the respite, for the chance to breathe, for the small mercy of being left alone. But I wasn't grateful. I was angry. You brought me here, I said, and my voice echoed in the cavernous room, louder than I intended. You told me I was yours. You made it sound like I mattered. Like I was something more than what they made me. He stopped. Didn't turn around. And now I find out I'm just what? An experiment. A project? Something you can use to rebuild your broken bloodline. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy and suffocating. Then he turned, and the look on his face stopped my heart. I have searched for you for 300 years, he said, and his voice was low and rough, and shaking with something that might have been rage, or might have been grief, or might have been something else entirely. 300 years of hunting through pack, records and rogue dens and places so dark they don't have names. 300 years of watching my people die, one by one, knowing that when the last of us fell, there would be no one to take our place. No future. No hope. Nothing but the dark and the silence and the end of everything we were. He walked toward me, and I didn't retreat. Couldn't retreat. His presence pressed against me like a physical force, and I felt my wolf rise to meet it, not in submission, not this time, but in something that felt terrifyingly like defiance. You think I brought you here to use you? He stopped inches from me, close enough that I could feel his breath on my face, close enough that I could see the gold of his eyes flickering like flames. You think I look at you and see a breeder? A tool? A means to an end? His hand came up, and his fingers brushed my hair back from my face, and the touch sent electricity racing down my spine. I looked at you, he said, and I saw the first thing in 300 years that made me feel like I wasn't already dead. His hand cupped my cheek, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there, frozen, as the king of the lichens looked at me like I was the sun coming up after an endless night. You're not a project, he said. You're not an experiment. You're not a tool for rebuilding anything. He leaned closer, and his forehead touched mine, and the contact sent something cracking through the walls I had built around myself. Something that felt like a door opening. Something that felt like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known existed. You're the only thing in this world, he whispered, that has ever made me want to live. And then he pulled back, turned away, walked to the door with the same measured stride he had used to walk through the forest, through the gate, through the courtyard full of hungry eyes. He stopped with his hand on the frame and looked back at me one last time. 3 months, he said. That's what I told them. That's what I promised. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something in them that I didn't understand. Something raw and real and so vulnerable it made my chest ache. But I've been waiting for you for 300 years, he said. I can wait 3 months more. The door closed behind him, and I stood alone in the room full of books and maps and furs and firelight, and I felt something I had never felt before. I felt seen. The woman, her name was Sarah, I learned later, and she was the last of the female Lycans who had survived the purges, stayed with me through the night. She didn't speak, didn't offer comfort, didn't do anything except sit in the corner of the room, her storm grey eyes fixed on me, watching, waiting. What is she waiting for? I asked my Wolf. To see if you break. My Wolf answered. To see if you're strong enough to survive what comes next. And if I'm not? My Wolf didn't answer, but I felt her press against my ribs, felt her strength flow into my limbs, felt her determination settle into my bones. You are, she said finally. You are strong enough. You have always been strong enough. You just never had anyone who believed it. I looked at Sarah, at the cold-eyed woman who had called me a liability, who had looked at me like I was a threat to everything she had built, who had agreed to train me only because her king commanded it. And I made a decision. I'm not going to break, I said, and my voice was steady, strong. Sure, I'm not going to run. I'm not going to give you a reason to cast me out. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You think that's enough? You think not breaking makes you worthy? I think, I said slowly, that you've been alone for a very long time. I think you've watched everyone you loved die. I think you've been waiting for someone to come along who could carry what you've been carrying, and you're afraid that someone is me. Sarah went very still. I don't know what I am, I said. I don't know if I'm strong enough to be what you need me to be. But I know what it's like to be the last one. The only one. The one everyone looks at like she's already dead. I met her eyes and didn't look away. I know what it's like to be afraid. And I know that the only thing that makes the fear bearable is having something to fight for. Sarah stared at me for a long, long moment. And then slowly, almost reluctantly, the corner of her mouth twitched. You talk too much, she said. But there was something different in her voice now. Something almost warm. Tomorrow, she said, rising from her chair. We start with the basics. Your Wolf has been suppressed for too long. We need to wake her up. Need to see what she can do. She paused at the door and looked back at me. Leonidas was right about one thing, she said. You are the first female in 500 years. But that doesn't make you special. That doesn't make you valuable. What makes you valuable? What makes you dangerous is what you choose to do with what you are. She opened the door, and the torchlight from the hallway cast her shadow long and dark across the floor. The packs killed us because they were afraid of what we could become, she said. Don't prove them right. The door closed, and I was alone. I sat down on the furs, my legs suddenly unable to hold me, and I let the weight of the night press down on me. The journey, the revelation, the king who looked at me like I was the sun rising after an endless night. 3 months, I thought. 3 months to prove I'm not a liability. 3 months to become something I don't understand. 3 months to decide what I want to be. I looked at my wrists, at the bruises left by the silver rope, the marks of a pack that had thrown me away like garbage, and I felt something cold and sharp settle into my chest. They thought I was nothing. I thought. They tied me to a tree and left me to die, because they thought I was nothing. I closed my eyes and I let the darkness take me, and I dreamed of gold eyes and a voice that promised things I was afraid to hope for. They were wrong. I thought as sleep pulled me under, and when they find out what I really am, they're going to wish they had killed me when they had the chance. End of part 2. 3 months to prove herself. 3 months to awaken the power that has been sleeping in her blood for 2 decades. 3 months to become something the world has not seen in 500 years. But in a kingdom of monsters, becoming powerful is the same as becoming a target. And there are those in Leonidas's own pack who would rather see Zarya dead than see her rise. In part 3, Zarya's training begins, and she discovers that the power inside her is more dangerous and more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. But as she grows stronger, so do the enemies who want to see her fall. And when an assassination attempt reveals a conspiracy at the heart, of the Lycan kingdom, Zarya must decide who she can trust and who she must destroy. The fire is coming, and Zarya is holding the match. If you're feeling this story in your bones, if Zarya's fight is becoming your fight, then you need to do something right now. Like this story. Let me know you're invested. Let me know you're here for the journey. Share it with someone who needs to read about a woman who refuses to be defined by the people who try to destroy her. And subscribe now, because part 3 is where everything changes. Part 3 is where Zarya stops being the victim and starts becoming the predator. You don't want to miss it. Part 3, The Awakening. The power inside me was not gentle. It did not ask permission. It did not care that I was afraid, that I was unprepared, that I had spent my entire life believing I was weak. When it broke free like a star going supernova, beautiful, terrible, and utterly without mercy. And in its wake, it left behind something I had never been before. Something I didn't recognize. Something that looked back at me from the mirror with eyes that were no longer mine. 3 months. That was what they had given me. 3 months to become something I didn't understand. 3 months to prove I was worth the air I breathed. 3 months to convince a kingdom of monsters that I was not a liability to be eliminated. On the first morning, I woke to find a dress laid out on the chair beside my bed. It was simple leather and linen, dark as smoke, fitted close to the body in a way that made me feel exposed and armored at the same time. Beside it, a pair of boots that laced to the knee, a belt with a sheathed knife I didn't know how to use. And on the floor, waiting with her arms crossed and her face set in the same cold mask she had worn the night before, was Sierra. "Get dressed," she said. "We start in an hour." I dressed in silence, my fingers clumsy on the unfamiliar laces, my mind racing with questions I didn't know how to ask. The knife sat against my hip like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The leather clung to my skin like a second layer, and for the first time in my life, I looked at myself and saw something other than a defect. Something other than an omega. Something other than nothing. "You look like a warrior," my Wolf whispered, and her voice was stronger this morning. Louder. "You look like what you were always meant to be." "I look like a girl playing dress up," I answered. "I look like someone who's going to get herself killed." "Maybe," my Wolf said, "but at least you'll die looking like yourself." I followed Sierra through the keep, through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that made no sense. Past doors that led to rooms I couldn't see into. Past Lycans who watched me with the same hungry, calculating eyes I had seen the night before. None of them spoke to me. None of them acknowledged me beyond the briefest flicker of interest. I was a curiosity, I realized. A puzzle they hadn't yet decided how to solve. We emerged into a courtyard I hadn't seen before, smaller than the main training ground, walled in on all sides, with a ceiling of woven branches that filtered the morning light into patterns of gold and shadow. The ground was packed earth, scarred with claw marks and stained with something that might have been old blood. In the center of the courtyard, waiting with his arms crossed and his face unreadable, stood Leonidas. He was different in the daylight. Still massive, still terrifying, still everything the stories had promised and more. But there was something in his face that softened when he looked at me. Something that made the hard lines of his jaw less like a blade and more like something else. Something I didn't have a name for. "You're late," he said, and his voice was flat, that his eyes were anything but. "You said an hour," Sarah said. "It's been 40 minutes. She's early then." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile, almost. An unexpected quality in someone from Pack territory. I bristled at the dismissal in his tone. "I'm not from Pack territory. I was kept in Pack territory." "There's a difference." Leonidas's eyebrows rose. Sierra made a sound that might have been surprise or might have been approval. "There is," Leonidas said slowly. "I didn't think you'd see it so quickly. I've had a lot of time to think about the difference between being kept and being, Wanted, I said. About 20 years, give or take. Silence. Sarah and Leonidas exchanged the look I couldn't interpret. Then Leonidas nodded. Good. Anger is useful. It keeps you alive when nothing else will. He stepped forward, and I forced myself not to retreat. Today, we find out what you're capable of. What your wolf can do when she's not being suppressed by pack bombs and silver and a lifetime of being told you're nothing. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his skin, close enough that I could smell him smoke and pine and something else, something that made my wolf stir in my chest. I'm going to push you, he said. Harder than you've ever been pushed. Harder than you think you can survive. I'm going to break down every wall you've built, every defense you've constructed, every lie you've told yourself about who you are and what you can do. His hand came up, and his fingers brushed my chin, tilting my face up to meet his eyes. And when I'm done, he said softly, there will be nothing left of the girl who was tied to a tree and left to die. Nothing left of the omega. Nothing left of the defect. His thumb traced the line of my jaw, and I couldn't breathe. There will only be you, he said. The real you. The one you've been hiding from your whole life. He stepped back, and the spell broke. Shift, he said. I stared at him. What? Shift, he repeated. Change. Transform. Become what you were born to be. I need to see her. I need to see the wolf you've been keeping locked away. I shook my head. I can't. I don't know how. The pack healers said my wolf was defective. That I couldn't. Your wolf is not defective, Leonidas interrupted, and there was iron in his voice. Your wolf was suppressed. There's a difference. The pack bombs, the silver, the constant pressure of being surrounded by wolves who didn't want you all of it kept her small, kept her quiet, kept her from growing into what she was meant to be. He stepped closer again, and this time, I felt something shift in the air between us. Something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Something that made my heart beat faster. But you're not in pack territory anymore, he said. You're not surrounded by wolves who want to keep you small. You're surrounded by wolves who want to see you grow. And I'm not going to let you hide from yourself any longer. His hand closed around my wrist, and I felt something surge through me, a heat, a pressure, a force that pushed against the walls I had spent 20 years building. Let me out, my wolf said, and her voice was no longer thin and reedy. It was strong. It was fierce. It was hungry. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out. The change came without warning. One moment I was standing in the courtyard, my wrist in Leonidas's grip, my heart pounding in my chest. The next, my bones were breaking. I had seen wolves shift before, watched them transform from human to wolf in a cascade of snapping bones and rippling skin. It was supposed to hurt, every wolf knew that, but it was supposed to be controlled, intentional. A choice made, not a force endured. This was not that. This was my body rebelling against itself, my bones reshaping without my permission, my skin tearing and healing and tearing again as something that had been caged for 20 years finally broke free. I screamed. I think I screamed. That the sound was lost in the crack of my spine, the stretch of my limbs, the impossible pull of something that had been waiting for this moment since before I was born. And then it was over. I was on the ground, on 4 legs, my chest heaving, my lungs burning, my mind reeling from the sudden shift in perspective. The world looked different from here, sharper, clearer, every scent and sound and sensation amplified 100-fold. I could smell the earth beneath my paws, the leather of Sierra's boots, the smoke and pine of Leonidas's skin. I could hear the beat of his heart, steady and strong, and beneath it, another rhythm faster, wilder, almost frantic. My own heart. My wolf's heart. I looked up at Leonidas, and for a moment, I didn't know what to expect. Fear? Disgust? The same dismissal I had seen in 100 pack wolves. Eyes when they looked at me and saw something they didn't understand. That his face wasn't dismissive, wasn't disgusted, wasn't anything I had prepared myself for. He was looking at me like I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "There you are," he said softly, and his voice was rough with something that might have been awe. "There you are." I don't know how long I stayed in wolf form. Minutes, maybe. Hours. Time moved differently when I was her slower, more deliberate, each moment stretching out like honey on a cold morning. I explored the courtyard with senses I had never been allowed to use, smelling the old blood in the earth, tasting the morning air, feeling the sun on my fur like a blessing I had waited my whole life to receive. And through it all, I felt her. My Wulf. Not as a presence inside me, not as a voice in my head, but as me, as the truest version of myself I had ever been. "This is what you were meant to be," she said. And her voice was my voice now. "This is what they took from you. This is what you're going to take back." When I finally shifted back slowly this time, deliberately, the change flowing through me like water, rather than breaking me like stone, I found Sarah and Leonidas standing exactly where I had left them. Sarah's face was unreadable, but her hands were shaking. Leonidas's hands were steady, but his eyes were burning. "You shifted," he said. "Fully, completely, in less than an hour. Is that good?" My voice was hoarse, my throat raw from screaming. I was sitting on the ground, my human body feeling strange and clumsy after the freedom of the wolf. Sarah laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. "Good? Girl, it took me 6 months to shift for the first time. 6 months of training, of pain, of almost dying 3 times before I finally managed to hold the change. You did it in an hour." She looked at Leonidas, and for the first time, I saw something like fear in her eyes. "She's not just Lycan," she said. "She's something else. Something I've never seen before." Leonidas didn't answer. He was still looking at me, still burning, and I felt something stir in my chest that had nothing to do with the shift. "Again," he said. "What?" "Again," he repeated. "Shift again. I need to see if you can control it. I need to see if you can do it on command." I should have been exhausted. Should have been shaking, weak, unable to move. Shifting took energy, every wolf knew that. A first shift, especially one as violent as mine had been, should have left me drained for days. But I wasn't tired. I wasn't weak. I was hungry. Hungry for more. Hungry for the freedom I had tasted. Hungry for the power that was finally mine. I closed my eyes and I reached for the wolf. She was there, waiting, ready. The second shift was easier. Not painless, nothing about becoming something else could ever be painless, but smoother, faster. The change rolled through me like thunder, and when I opened my eyes, I was on 4 legs again, my fur silver in the morning light, my breath misting in the cold air. Leonidas stepped toward me, and I didn't retreat, didn't flinch. I held my ground as the Lycan King knelt before me, his golden eyes level with mine, his hand rising slowly to rest on the space between my ears. "You have no idea what you are," he murmured. "No idea what you're capable of. No idea what you're going to become." His fingers stroked through my fur, and I felt something inside me purr a sound I had never made before. A sound that vibrated through my chest and up, into my throat and out into the morning air. "You're going to be magnificent," Leonidas said. "And everyone who ever looked at you and saw weakness is going to burn." The days that followed blurred together into a haze of pain and transformation and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. Sarah trained me in the morning's combat, strategy, the history of the Lycan people and the purges that had nearly destroyed them. She was brutal in her teaching, relentless in her demands, and utterly without pity. I failed 100 times for every success, fell 1,000 times for every time I stood. bled so often that I lost count of the wounds. But I learned to fight, to track, to hunt, to use senses I had never been allowed to develop. I learned the history of my people, the Lycans who had once ruled the forests, the packs who had risen against them, the centuries of slaughter that had reduced a great people to a handful of survivors, clinging to a territory that grew smaller with every passing year. And I learned about the females. They were the heart of us, Sierra said one morning, her voice flat, her eyes distant. The soul of what we were. The females carried the bloodlines, preserved the histories, maintained the bonds that kept us whole. Without them, we're not a people. We're just soldiers. Warriors with nothing to fight for but survival. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something almost like grief in her face. You're not just the first female in 500 years, she said. You're the first chance we've had to remember what we were. The first chance we've had to become something more than what the packs made us. And if I fail? I asked. If I'm not strong enough? Sierra's smile was a terrible thing. Then we're already dead. We just haven't stopped breathing yet. Leonidas trained me in the afternoons, where Sierra was brutal and relentless. Leonidas was something else entirely. He pushed me harder than she did, demanded more, gave less quarter. That there was something in the way he trained me, something that made the pain bearable, the exhaustion endurable, the fear survivable. He never touched me in training, never laid a hand on me, never gave me anything to hold on to when the pain was too much and the fear was drowning me, and everything I had ever been was being stripped away layer by layer. But he was always there, always watching, always present in a way that made me feel like I wasn't alone, even when I was. You're holding back, he said one afternoon, after I had failed to hold the shift for the 10th time. I was on my knees in the training yard, my hands bloody, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my wolf snarling in my chest with frustration. I'm not, I gasped. I'm giving everything I have. No. He knelt in front of me, close enough that I could see the gold in his eyes, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. You're giving everything you think you have. But you have more. You've always had more. And until you stop being afraid of it, you'll never be what you're meant to be. I'm not afraid, I said, but the words tasted like lies in my mouth. He smiled, and there was no warmth in it. You're terrified. Not of me. Not of the training. Not of the pain. His hand came up, and his fingers brushed my cheek, wiping away tears I hadn't realized I was crying. You're afraid of what you're becoming. Afraid that if you let go completely, if you become what you were born to be, there won't be anything left of the person you were. I couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but sit there, frozen, as he looked at me with eyes that saw too much. You're wrong, he said softly. What you're becoming isn't the death of who you were. It's the fulfillment. Everything you were, the strength, the resilience, the refusal to break even when the whole world was trying to break. You, all of it is still going to be there. It's just going to be bigger, stronger, more. His hand cut my cheek, and I leaned into his touch without meaning to, without wanting to, without being able to stop myself. You're not losing yourself, he said. You're finding yourself. And when you finally stop fighting, when you finally let yourself become what you were always meant to be. He leaned closer, and his forehead touched mine, and I felt something in my chest crack open. You're going to be unstoppable, he whispered. And I'm going to be right beside you, watching the world burn. The first assassination attempt came on the 47th day. I was in the library, my library, the one Leonidas had given me on my first night studying the histories Sierra had assigned me. The fire was low, the shadows long, the silence heavy with the weight of 1,000 years of grief and glory. I heard them before I saw them. 3 of them, maybe 4, moving through the corridors, with the careful silence of wolves who had been hunting since before I was born. My wolf rose before my mind could catch up. She was faster now, stronger, more present than she had ever been. She felt the threat before I understood it, and she was ready. "Let me," she said. "Let me protect us." I didn't argue. I didn't hesitate. I let go. The shift came in a heartbeat faster than it had any right to be, smoother than I had any right to expect. One moment I was human, sitting at my desk with a book in my hands. The next I was wolf, my paws silent on the stone floor, my senses reaching out to taste the fear of the wolves who thought they were hunting prey. The first one came through the door at a run, his knife raised, his eyes wild. He was younger than me, maybe, or maybe. Lichens just aged differently, and his face was twisted with something that looked like hatred and smelled like fear. He never saw me coming. I was on him before he could blink, my teeth closing around his wrist, the knife clattering to the floor as he screamed. I felt his bones crack beneath my jaws, felt his blood hot on my tongue, and something inside me rejoiced. "This," my wolf snarled. "This is what we were made for." The second and third came together, and they were smarter than the first. They didn't rush, didn't underestimate me. They moved like soldiers, coordinated, practiced, their knives gleaming in the firelight. But they had never fought a female, lichen, had never faced something that had been caged for 20 years and was finally free. I moved through them like water through stone fluid, unstoppable, inevitable. I was faster than they expected, stronger than they knew, more vicious than they could imagine. I took them down one by one, my teeth and claws finding flesh, my wolf laughing in my chest with every scream, every crack of bone, every spray of blood. When it was over, I stood in the center of the library, my fur matted with blood, my chest heaving, my heart pounding with a joy I had never felt before. I am not weak, I thought. I am not nothing. I am not the girl they tied to a tree and left to die. I am lichen. The door opened again, and I spun, ready to fight, ready to kill, ready to... Leonidas stood in the doorway, his face pale, his hands clenched at his sides, his eyes fixed on the bodies at my feet. His eyes met mine, and I waited for the anger, the disappointment, the cold dismissal that I had been expecting my whole life. But his face wasn't angry, wasn't disappointed, wasn't cold. He was looking at me the way he had looked at me on the first night, the way he had looked at me when I shifted for the first time, the way he had looked at me in the training yard when he told me I was going to be unstoppable. "There you are," he said softly, and his voice was rough with something that might have been pride. "There you are." I shifted back, my human form feeling strange and fragile after the violence of the fight. I was naked, covered in blood, shaking with adrenaline and something that felt terrifyingly like joy. "They tried to kill me," I said, and my voice was steady, calm, cold. "They thought I was weak. They thought they could. I know." He walked toward me, stepping over the bodies without looking at them, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know who sent them. I know why. And I know what needs to be done." He stopped in front of me, and his hand came up to touch my face. His fingers were warm, his touch gentle, and I leaned into it like a flower turning toward the sun. "You could have died," he said. He said, "They could have killed you, but they didn't." "No." His hand slid into my hair and he pulled me closer and I let him. "They didn't. Because you're not weak. You're not fragile. You're not anything they thought you were." His forehead touched mine and I closed my eyes. And for a moment, just a moment, I let myself be held. "You're mine," he said, and his voice was fierce, possessive, absolute. "And anyone who tries to take you from me is going to learn what it means to be hunted by a king." I opened my eyes and I looked at him, and I saw something in his face that I had never seen before. Fear, not of me, not of what I was becoming. Fear of losing me. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm not going to let them win. His grip tightened in my hair. Promise me. I promise. He kissed me then hard and desperate and hungry, his mouth claiming mine like he had been waiting for this moment for 300 years. And maybe he had. Maybe he had been waiting for me, searching for me, hoping for me, for longer than I could imagine. And when he pulled back, when I opened my eyes and looked at him, I saw something in his face that made my heart stop. What? I asked. What is it? He shook his head, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable, almost human. The ones who sent those wolves, he said. The ones who want you dead. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened. They're not going to stop. Not until you're dead, or they are. He looked at me, and I saw the weight of centuries in his eyes. The grief, the loss, the desperation of a king who had watched his people die for 500 years and was terrified of losing the one thing that could save them. We need to leave, he said. Tonight, before they send more. I should have been afraid. Should have been terrified of running again, of being hunted again, of leaving the only safety I had known. But I wasn't afraid. I looked at the bodies on the floor, at the blood on my hands, at the king who was willing to burn his kingdom down to keep me safe. And I smiled. Where are we going? I asked. Leonidas smiled back, and it was a terrible thing. Beautiful and merciless and utterly without pity. Home, he said. I'm taking you home. End of part 3. Leonidas is taking Zarya to the place where the Lycans first fell. The place where the last female Lycan died. The place where the secrets of her bloodline are buried. But the conspiracy against her runs deeper than she ever imagined. And the enemy she thought she was running from isn't in the shadows behind her. It's in the shadows ahead. In part 4, the journey to the ancestral lands reveals the true history of the Lycan purges and the role Zarya's own bloodline played in them. But when betrayal comes from an unexpected source, Zarya must decide whether to run or to fight. And Leonidas must decide how far he's willing to go to keep her safe. The past is rising, and it wants blood. This story is building to something massive. Something that's going to change everything you think you know about power, about loyalty, about what it means to be strong when the whole wants you weak. Don't miss a single chapter. Like this story. Share it with someone who needs to read about a woman who refuses to break. And subscribe now because part 4 is where the real war begins. Part 4. The Ghosts of the Fall. The ancestral lands were not a place. They were a wound. A wound that had been bleeding for 500 years, seeping grief and rage and the ghosts of everything we had lost. And standing in the center of that wound, surrounded by the bones of her ancestors, Zarya finally understood the truth that had been hidden from her since the day she was born. She was not the last female Lycan. She was the weapon her people had been waiting for. And she was coming home. We traveled by night. It was safer that way, Leonidas said. The packs patrolled their borders during the day, their scouts fanning out across the territories like the fingers of a hand, searching for any sign of Lycan movement. But at night, the borders were thin. The packs retreated to their compounds, their fires burning bright against the darkness. Their eyes turned inward. They never looked up. We moved through the forest like shadows, our wolves silent on the fallen leaves, our senses stretched to their limits. Leonidas led, his massive form cutting through the darkness like a blade, and I followed, my heart pounding with something that felt like fear, but tasted like anticipation. Sierra had stayed behind. Someone needed to hold the territory, she said. Someone needed to keep the pack from tearing itself apart while their king was gone. But her eyes had lingered on me when we left, and I had seen something in them that I didn't understand. Something that looked like goodbye. She thinks we're not coming back, I told my wolf. She thinks we're going to die out there. Maybe we are, my wolf answered. But at least we'll die free. The ancestral lands were 3 days. Journey from the Lycan territory, 3 days through packlands, through neutral zones, through places that had been contested for so long that the ground itself seemed to remember the blood that had been spilled on it. We didn't speak much during those 3 days. There was no need. Leonidas and I had developed a rhythm in our training, a wordless communication that transcended speech. He would look at me, and I would know what he wanted. I would move, and he would know where I was going. It was the closest I had ever been to another living thing. Closer than pack, closer than family, closer than anything I had ever known. And it terrified me, because I was starting to realize that what I felt for Leonidas wasn't gratitude, wasn't loyalty, wasn't the desperate attachment of a rescued animal to its savior. It was something else, something I didn't have a name for, something that made my chest ache when he looked at me, something that made my hands shake when he touched me, something that made my wolf howl in my chest every time he was near. Mate, my wolf whispered. He's our mate. He's always been our mate. No, I told her. No, that's not possible. We're not. He's not. But even as I denied it, I felt the truth of it settling into my bones. The bond that had been forming between us since the moment he found me in that clearing. The pull I felt toward him, the way my body responded to his presence, the way my wolf sang whenever he was near. He was my mate, the king of the Lycans, the monster of 1,000 stories. And he had been searching for me for 300 years. On the 3rd night, we reached the boundary of the ancestral lands. I felt it before I saw it. A pressure in the air, a weight on my chest, a presence that pressed against my skin like the memory of something long dead. The forest changed here, the trees older, the shadows deeper, the silence more complete. Even the moon seemed different. Its light filtered through branches that had been growing since before any of us were born. Leonidas stopped at the edge of a clearing and shifted back to human form. I followed, the change flowing through me like water, and for a moment, we stood side by side in the darkness, naked and silent and utterly alone. What is this place? I asked, and my voice was barely a whisper. Leonidas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something I had never heard from him before. This is where we fell, he said. Where the Lycans made their last stand against the packs. Where we lost everything. He stepped forward, into the clearing, and I followed. The ground was wrong. I realized it as soon as my bare feet touched the earth. The soil was soft, too soft, almost muddy, and when I looked down I saw why. Bones. The ground was littered with bones. Human bones, wolf bones, bones that were neither and both, bleached white by centuries of sun and rain and the slow, patient work of decay. They crunched beneath my feet as I walked, and I felt something inside me crack open. 500 years ago, Leonidas said, his voice flat, clinical, like he was reading from a history book rather than walking. Through the grave of his people, the Lycans ruled the northern territories. We were the strongest, the fastest, the most powerful wolves in the world. The packs paid us tribute. The rogues stayed in their place. No one challenged us. No one dared. He stopped in the center of the clearing and turned to face me. The moonlight caught his face, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Grief. Then the packs realized something, he said. They realized that the Lycans had a weakness. The females. The females were the heart of us, the soul of us, the source of everything that made us strong. Without them, we couldn't reproduce, couldn't grow, couldn't survive. He knelt, his hand closing around a fragment of bone, and I watched his face shift from grief to something darker. So they killed them, he said. Every female they could find. Every girl, every woman, every pup who showed the first signs of Lycan blood. They hunted them through the forests, dragged them from their dens, slaughtered them in their beds. And we His voice cracked. We tried to protect them. We fought. We died. We lost. He looked up at me, and his eyes were burning. This is where it ended, he said. The last battle. The last stand. The last female lichen died here, right where you're standing. Her name was Azara. She was my sister. The world tilted. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, felt the bones crunch under my weight, felt the weight of 500 years of grief pressing down on me like a physical force. Your sister, I whispered. She was 17, he said. Younger than you. She had just come into her power. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And when the packs came, they broke through our lines and surrounded. She looked at me and she smiled. His voice broke. For the first time since I had known him, the Lichen King, the monster of 1,000 stories, the creature who had never shown weakness, broke. She told me to run, he said. She told me to live. She told me that as long as I was alive, the lichens weren't dead. That as long as I remembered her, she wasn't really gone. He closed his eyes, and I watched a tear trace down his cheek. I ran, he said. I left her. I left her to die so that I could live. And I have been running ever since. He opened his eyes, and they were dry now. Empty. Hollow. I searched for 500 years, he said. For another female. For any female. For someone who could carry what my sister carried. Who could be what she was. Who could give my people a future. He looked at me, and something in his face changed. The emptiness filled with something else. Something that looked like hope and terror and desperation all tangled together. And then I found you. He stood and he walked toward me, and I didn't move. Couldn't move. The weight of his grief, his guilt, his impossible hope was pressing down on me like the weight of the world. You're not my sister, he said. You're not a replacement for what I lost. You're not a tool for rebuilding what was destroyed. He stopped in front of me, close enough to touch, close enough to kiss, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin and the tremble in his hands. You're the reason I stopped running, he said. You're the reason I started hoping again. You're the reason I'm standing here, in this place I swore I would never come back to, digging up the bones of everything I lost so that I can finally start living again. His hand came up, and his fingers brushed my cheek, and I felt something inside me shatter. I don't know what you are, he said. I don't know why you exist, or how, or what you're going to become. But I know that I would burn this world to ash to keep you safe. I know that I would let it burn me to see you smile. I know that I have been waiting for you for 300 years, and I will wait for you for 300 more, because you are the only thing in this world that has ever made me want to live. He leaned forward, and his forehead touched mine, and I closed my eyes, and I let the tears fall. I don't know if I can be what you need, I whispered. I don't know if I can carry what you're asking me to carry. I don't know if I'm strong enough to. You're strong enough, he said. You've always been strong enough. You just never had anyone who believed it. He pulled back and his hands cupped my face, and he looked at me with eyes that held 500 years of grief and 500 years of hope and everything in between. I believe it, he said. I believe in you, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving to you that you are worth believing in. I kissed him. I didn't think, didn't plan, didn't do anything except reach up and pull his face down to mine and press my lips against his with a desperation that had been building inside me since the moment he found me in that clearing. He made a sound, something between a groan and a growl, and his arms wrapped around me, pulling me against him, holding me like he was afraid I would disappear if he let go. His mouth was hungry, demanding, and I matched him kiss for kiss, my fingers tangling in his hair, my body pressing against his, my Wolf howling in my chest with a joy I had never felt before. Mate, she sang. Mate, mate, mate. We fell to the ground together, into the bones of the dead, into the soil soaked with the blood of our ancestors, into the place where everything had ended, and everything was about to begin. His hands were on my skin, his mouth on my throat, his breath hot against my pulse, and I arched against him with a need that had no name. Zarya, he breathed, and my name on his lips was a prayer. Zarya, He stopped. I felt it too. A shift in the air. A change in the pressure. A presence that had not been there a moment before. Leonidas's body went rigid above me, his head turning toward the darkness at the edge of the clearing. "We have company," he said, and his voice was the voice of the king. Cold, commanding, dangerous. I shifted without thinking, my wolf rising to meet the threat. And Leonidas rose beside me, his massive form blocking mine, his golden eyes fixed on the darkness. Wolves stepped out of the tree line. Dozens of them. Scores. Their eyes glowed in the moonlight, their teeth bared, their claws extended. And at their head, walking with the easy confidence of a man who had never doubted his place in the world, was a figure I recognized. Declan, my alpha, my former alpha. The man who had tied me to a tree and left me to die. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner. The lines on his face deeper, the shadows under his eyes darker. But his smile was the same. That cold, calculating smile that had always made my skin crawl. Well, he said, and his voice was smooth, almost friendly. The king of the lichens, rolling around in the dirt with my omega. I have to say, Leonidas, I expected better taste. Leonidas didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt the rage roll off him in waves, felt his wolf pressing against his skin, felt the barely leashed violence that was all that was keeping Declan alive. "You're on lichen territory," Leonidas said, and his voice was ice. "You're surrounded by my wolves. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't. Tear your throat out where you stand." Declan's smile didn't waver. "Your wolves? Leonidas, your wolves are 3 days behind you. The ones you left to hold your territory. They're dead. The ones you thought were loyal. They're mine." He spread his arms, a gesture of mock generosity. "The Lichen Kingdom has fallen. Again. And this time, it's not going to get back up." I felt the truth of his words like a knife in my chest. Sira. The wolves who had trained me, watched me, protected me, gone. Because of him. Because of Declan. "You see," Declan continued, his eyes sliding from Leonidas to me, "I've been watching you for a long time, Zarya, longer than you know. I knew what you were from the moment you were born. I knew the lichen blood in your veins. I knew what you would become if you were ever allowed to grow." He took a step forward, and Leonidas's growl shook the ground. "I was the one who suppressed your wolf," Declan said. "I was the one who made sure you never shifted. I was the one who kept you small, kept you weak, kept you from becoming the monster you were born to be. Because I knew that, if you ever woke up, if you ever became what you were meant to be, you would destroy everything I had built." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already won. "But I made a mistake," he said. "I got careless. I let you live when I should have killed you. I let you go when I should have made sure you never came back." He shrugged. "Mistakes happen, but they can be fixed." He looked at Leonidas and his smile widened. "You see, King, I've been hunting the last female lichen for 20 years. Not to kill her, to control her, to use her, to build an army that no one could stand against." He laughed, and the sound was ugly. "And now you've done the work for me. You've awakened her. You've trained her. You've made her strong." He took another step forward, and Leonidas's claws dug into the earth. "And now," Declan said softly, "I'm going to take her. And I'm going to use her to finish what the pack started 500 years ago. I'm going to wipe the lichens from the face of the earth. And there's nothing you can do to stop me." The wolves surged forward, and Leonidas moved to meet them. And I shifted. Not the slow, deliberate shift I had learned in training. Not the controlled transformation that Sira had drilled into me. This was something else. Something faster. Something fiercer. The change came in a heartbeat. In a breath. In the space between one thought and the next. And when I opened my eyes, I was something I had never been before. I was not Wolf. I was not human. I was not anything that had a name. I was lichen. My body was larger than it had ever been. My first silver in the moonlight. My eyes burning with a fire that had been waiting to be lit since the day I was born. My claws were longer. My teeth sharper. My senses sharper than they had any right to be. I could smell Declan's fear from across the clearing. Could hear his heart racing. Could taste his terror on the air. And I reveled in it. I moved through the wolves like a storm, my claws finding flesh, my teeth finding bone, my wolf laughing in my chest with every scream, every crack, every spray of blood. They fell before me like wheat before a scythe. And I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop until every threat was dead, and every enemy was ash. Declan was running. I saw him break from the tree line, his wolf form streaking through the darkness, his tail between his legs, his pack dead behind him. And I let him go. Not because I was merciful. Not because I was tired. Not because I couldn't catch him. Because I wanted him to run. I wanted him to be afraid. I wanted him to spend every moment of the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering when I would come for him, knowing that I would. Because I would. When I shifted back, I was standing in the center of the clearing, surrounded by the bodies of Declan's wolves, my hands covered in blood, my chest heaving, my heart pounding. Leonidas was beside me, his face pale, his eyes wide, his hands shaking. "Zarya," he said, and his voice was rough. "Zarya, look at me." I looked at him, and for a moment, I didn't know what I would see in his face. Fear? Disgust? The same rejection I had been expecting my whole life. But his face wasn't afraid, wasn't disgusted, wasn't anything I prepared myself for. He was looking at me like I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "There you are," he said softly. "There you are." I fell into his arms, and he held me, and I let myself be held, and for a moment, just a moment, I let myself believe that everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't. Because Declan was still out there, and he knew where we were going, and he had already taken everything from us once. He wouldn't hesitate to do it again. End of part 4. Declan is gone. But he's not defeated. He knows where Zarya is going. He knows what she's looking for, and he will stop at nothing to make sure she never finds it. In part 5, Zarya and Leonidas continue their journey to the heart of the ancestral lands, where the secrets of Zarya's bloodline are buried. But the closer they get to the truth, the more dangerous their enemies become. And when a betrayal from within threatens to destroy everything they've built, Zarya must make a choice that will change her forever. The past is calling, and it wants blood. This story is getting darker, deeper, more dangerous. And Zarya is becoming something that no one, not the Pax, not the Lycans, not even Leonidas is prepared for. Don't miss a moment. Like this story. Share it with someone who needs to read about a woman who refuses to be prey. And subscribe now, because part 5 is where everything changes. Part 5. The blood of the fallen. The temple was not built. It was grown. Grown from the bones of the dead and the blood of the fallen. Its walls pulsing with a heartbeat that had been beating for 500 years. And at its center, waiting in a chamber that had not seen light since the day the last female, Lycan, died, was the truth that had been buried with her. The truth about what I was. The truth about what I could become. The truth that the Pax had killed to keep hidden. And the truth that would destroy them all. We found the temple at dawn. It rose from the earth like a wound, its walls black and slick with moisture, its arches curving toward the sky, like the ribs of some ancient beast. The ground around it was bare of trees, bare of grass, bare of anything, except the bones that had been bleached white by centuries of sun and rain. Leonidas stopped at the edge of the clearing, and I felt the weight of his grief pressing against me like a physical force. "This is where she died," he said. "My sister, Izara. She was the last one to enter the temple. She was the one who sealed it. She gave her life to keep the truth safe." He looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. "I never knew what she was protecting," he said. "She didn't tell me. Couldn't tell me. She just said that when the time came, I would know. That when the right wolf appeared, she would lead me here." He reached out, and his hand closed around mine. "You're the right wolf, Zarya. You're the one she was waiting for. And whatever is in there, whatever truth she died to protect, it's yours now." I looked at the temple, at the darkness waiting within its walls, and I felt something stir in my chest. Something that had been waiting for this moment since before I was born. "Come with me," I said. "Don't let me go alone." He nodded, and we walked into the darkness together. The temple was not empty. I felt them before I saw them. The ghosts of the fallen, the spirits of the lichens who had died to protect this place. They moved through the shadows like smoke, their forms flickering in and out of visibility, their voices whispering in languages I didn't understand. "She comes," they whispered. "The blood of the fallen, the hope of the dead. She comes to claim what was taken." Leonidas's grip on my hand tightened, but he didn't speak. Didn't ask if I was afraid. Didn't offer to turn back. He just walked beside me, his presence steady and solid, his warmth a barrier against the cold that seeped from the walls. We walked through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that made no sense, past chambers filled with bones, past altars stained with blood that still looked wet after 500 years. The ghosts followed us, their whispers growing louder, their forms growing clearer, until I could see their faces. Women, mostly. Lichen females, their faces etched with grief and rage and something that looked like hope. "She comes," they sang. "She comes. She comes." And then we reached the center of the temple. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness, its walls covered in carvings that told a story I was only beginning to understand. At the center of the chamber, on a throne made of bones and stone, sat a figure that made my heart stop. She was beautiful, more beautiful than any wolf I had ever seen, her skin pale as moonlight, her hair silver as starlight, her eyes the color of winter ice. She wore armor that gleamed like water, and in her hands, she held a blade that burned with a fire that had no heat. She opened her eyes, and she looked at me, and I knew. "Izara," I breathed. She smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had been waiting for 500 years. "Sister," she said, "I've been waiting for you." I didn't understand. Couldn't understand. I was not her sister. I was not anything. I was a defect, an omega, a wolf with no scent who had been tied to a tree and left to die. But when she looked at me, I felt the truth of her, words settling into my bones like something that had always been there, waiting to be named. "You carry my blood," she said. "The blood of the last female, lichen. The blood of the one who died to keep the truth safe." She rose from her throne, and the ghosts that filled the chamber fell silent. "You carry the blood of the fallen, and you carry the power that the Pax feared so much they slaughtered us to keep it buried." She walked toward me, and I felt the weight of 500 years pressing down on me. 500 years of waiting. 500 years of hoping. 500 years of watching the world turn without her. "Do you know why the Pax killed us?" she asked. "Do you know why they hunted us, slaughtered us, burned our dens and murdered our pups?" I shook my head. "Because we were stronger," she said. "Stronger than any wolf, stronger than any pack, stronger than anything they had ever seen. But that wasn't what they feared. She stopped in front of me, close enough to touch, close enough to see the fire burning in her ice-colored eyes. What they feared was what we could create. She reached out, and her hand closed around mine, and I felt something surge through me. A power I had never felt before. A power that made my bones sing and my blood burn and my Wolf howl with the joy I had never known. Female lichens are not just warriors, she said. They are creators. They carry the power to bind packs, to forge alliances, to create bonds that cannot be broken. They carry the power to unite the wolves, to end the wars, to build something that has not existed since the old times. She squeezed my hand, and I felt the power building inside me, growing, expanding, until I thought I would burst with it. The packs didn't kill us because they feared us, she said. They killed us because they needed us. Because without us, they would tear themselves apart. Without us, they would fight and kill and destroy until there was nothing left. She smiled, and it was a terrible thing. Beautiful and merciless and utterly without pity. They were right to fear us, she said. That they were wrong to think killing us would save them. She let go of my hand, and the power receded, leaving me shaking, gasping, barely able to stand. The packs have been fighting for 500 years, she said. Wasting lives, wasting land, wasting everything their ancestors died to build. They've forgotten why they fought. They've forgotten what they were fighting for. They've forgotten that we were not their enemies. She looked at Leonidas, and her face softened. We were their hope, she said. We were their future. We were the only thing that could have saved them from themselves. She looked back at me, and her eyes were burning. You were the last of us, she said. The last female lichen. The last hope of the wolves. You carry the power to unite them, or destroy them. You carry the choice that will decide the fate of every wolf in this world. She reached out, and her hand pressed against my chest, over my heart. What will you choose, sister? She asked. Will you be their destruction, or will you be their salvation? I looked at her, at the ghost of a woman who had died to protect, a truth that had been buried for 500 years. I looked at Leonidas, at the king who had searched for me for 300 years, who had awakened me, who had made me believe that I was something more than nothing. And I looked inside myself, at the wolf that had been caged for 20 years, at the power that had been waiting to be released, at the choice that had been waiting to be made. I choose, I said, and my voice was steady, to be what I was always meant to be. Izara smiled. And what is that? I closed my eyes, and I reached for the power that had been building inside me since the moment I was born. I reached for the blood of the fallen, the hope of the dead, the future that had been waiting for 500 years to be born. And I let it in. The power filled me like fire, burning through every wall I had ever built, every defense I had ever constructed, every lie I had ever told myself about who I was and what I could be. I felt my body change, felt my wolf rise, felt something more rising with her, something that had been waiting for this moment since before I was born. When I opened my eyes, I was not human. I was not wolf. I was not anything that had a name. I was lichen, truly lichen, the first female lichen to be born in 500 years, the first female lichen to come into her full power since the purges. And I was unstoppable. Izara looked at me, and her eyes were shining with tears. There you are, she whispered. There you are. She stepped back, and her form began to fade. Her ghost finally released from the duty that had bound her for 500 years. The packs are coming, she said. Declan has rallied them. He has told them that the lichens are rising, that the old war is beginning again, that the only way to survive is to destroy us before we destroy them. She smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had already won. He's wrong, she said. The old war ended 500 years ago. A new war is beginning. A war that will end with the wolves united or the wolves destroyed. She looked at me, and her eyes were burning. That choice is yours, sister. Yours and yours alone. She faded, and the chamber went dark, and I was alone with Leonidas and the power that was burning inside me. The packs are coming, I said. Declan is leading them. They're going to destroy the Lycans. Destroy everything you've built. Leonidas nodded, his face grim. I know. I looked at him, at the king who had searched for me for 300 years, who had awakened me, who had made me believe that I was something more than nothing. They're not going to destroy us, I said. We're going to destroy them. Leonidas's eyes widened. Saria, Declan used me, I said. He tied me to a tree. He left me to die. He suppressed my wolf. He made me believe I was nothing. I looked at my hands, at the power that was burning in my veins, at the future that was waiting to be born. He made a mistake. He let me live. He let me become what I was always meant to be. I looked at Leonidas and I smiled. Now I'm going to show him what happens when you make a monster. End of part 5. The packs are coming. Declan is leading them. And Zarya is no longer the girl who was tied to a tree and left to die. She is the last female Lycan, the hope of the fallen, the weapon that will either unite the wolves or destroy them all. In part 6, the final battle. The packs against the Lycans. Declan against Zarya. The past against the future. And when the dust settles, only one truth will remain. The girl they threw away has become the woman who will decide the fate of them all. The war is coming, and Zarya is holding the match. This is it. The final chapter. Everything Zarya has been through. Everything she has become. Everything she has lost and gained and fought for it all comes down to this. Don't miss the conclusion. Like this story. Share it with someone who needs to see a woman rise from the ashes. And subscribe now, because part 6 is going to change everything. Part 6, The Reckoning. They came with fire and steel, with the memory of old wars and the fear of what we might become. They came to finish what their ancestors started 500 years ago. They came to destroy us, to bury us, to make sure the Lycans never rose again. But they forgot one thing. I was not their enemy. I was not their prey. I was not the monster they had created in their stories and their nightmares. I was the last female Lycan, the hope of the fallen, the future they had tried to kill. And I was not going to let them win. The sun was setting when the packs arrived. I stood at the edge of the ancestral lands, the temple at my back, the ghosts of the fallen at my side, and I watched them come. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. Wolves from every pack in the northern territories, their banners flying, their alphas at their head, their fear and their hatred and their desperation driving them forward like a tide that could not be stopped. At their head, riding in a chariot pulled by wolves, was Declan. He looked different than he had in the clearing. Stronger, more confident. The fear that had been in his eyes was gone, replaced by something that looked like certainty. He had won, he believed. He had rallied the packs. He had brought an army that could crush the Lycans, that could wipe them from the face of the earth, that could make sure the old war ended once and for all. He was wrong. Zarya. Leonidas's voice was low, urgent. We don't have to do this. We can run. We can hide. We can. No. I turned to face him, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear of the packs. Not fear of the battle that was coming. Fear of losing me. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I'm done being the girl they threw away. I reached up, and my hand cupped his cheek, and I felt the warmth of his skin against my palm. I'm not running anymore, I said. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not letting them decide who I am and what I can be. He closed his eyes, and his hand covered mine, and I felt the tremor in his fingers. Then we fight, he said. Together, I smiled. Together, the battle began at moonrise. The pack surged forward, their wolves screaming, their claws flashing, their hatred and their fear driving them toward the Lycan lines. And the lichens met them with a ferocity that had been building for 500 years. They fought like wolves who had nothing left to lose, like wolves who had been waiting for this moment since the day their sisters were slaughtered, like wolves who would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. But the packs had numbers. They had weapons. They had the momentum of 500 years of fear and hatred driving them forward. And the lichens were falling. I watched from the temple steps, the power burning in my veins, the ghosts of the fallen whispering in my ears, and I knew that I had to act. I had to do something. I had to end this before the lichens were destroyed, before everything we had built was lost, before Declan's hatred consumed us all. So I stepped forward, and I let the power go. It rose from me like a wave, like a tide, like a fire that had been burning for 500 years and was finally being released. It swept across the battlefield, touching every wolf, every pack, every heart that had been hardened by fear and hatred, and the memory of old wars. And in that moment they saw the truth that had been hidden from them for 500 years. They saw the lichen females who had died not as monsters, but as mothers, as sisters, as daughters. They saw the packs that had hunted them not as heroes, but as murderers. They saw the war that had been fought not as a battle for survival, but as a slaughter of the innocent. They saw and they felt, and they fell to their knees. All of them. Thousands of wolves, tens of thousands, falling to their knees, their weapons dropping from their hands, their hatred draining from their hearts. They looked at me with eyes that were no longer filled with fear, but with something that looked like wonder. And Declan stood alone. He stood in his chariot, his face twisted with rage, his hands shaking, his eyes wild. He had lost. He knew he had lost. But he would not accept it. Could not accept it. You, he screamed, pointing at me. You did this. You corrupted them. You poisoned their minds. You. No, I said, and my voice carried across the battlefield, across the temple grounds, across the ancestral lands that had been waiting for this moment for 500 years. I showed them the truth you tried to bury, the truth you killed to keep hidden. I walked toward him, and he flinched. He flinched. The alpha who had tied me to a tree, who had left me to die, who had made me believe I was nothing, he flinched at the sight of me. You were afraid of me, I said. You were afraid of what I could become. So you suppressed me. You caged me. You made me believe I was weak, that I was nothing, that I was less than the dirt beneath your feet. I stopped in front of him, and I looked up at him, and I smiled. But you were wrong, I said. I was never weak. I was never nothing. I was never anything you thought I was. I reached out, and my hand closed around his throat, and I felt his pulse racing beneath my fingers. I was always going to become this, I said. I was always going to rise. I was always going to be the thing you feared most. And there was nothing you could do to stop me, he gasped, his hands clawing at my wrist, his eyes wide with terror. Please, he whispered. Please, Zaria, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't. Don't what? I asked. Don't kill you? Don't make you pay for everything you did? Don't become the monster you always thought I was? I tightened my grip, and I watched his face go pale. You tied me to a tree, I said. You left me to die. You made me believe I was nothing. And now you're begging for mercy? I leaned closer and I whispered in his ear. You want mercy? Then live. Live with what you did. Live with what you became. Live with the knowledge that the girl you threw away is the only reason. You're still breathing. I let go and he collapsed at my feet, sobbing, broken, defeated. And I turned my back on him and walked away. The packs didn't stay. They couldn't. The truth I had shown them was too much, too raw, too painful to face. They retreated to their territories, their tails between their legs, their hearts heavy with the weight of 500 years of lies. that they would come back, not to fight but to talk, to negotiate, to build something new. I had shown them the truth, and the truth would set them free, or it would destroy them. That was the choice they had to make, the choice I had given them. I stood on the steps of the temple, watching them go, and I felt Leonidas's presence behind me before I heard his voice. "You let him live," he said. "Why?" I turned to face him, and I saw the question in his eyes, the confusion, the hope. "Because I'm not him," I said. "I'm not the monster he was. I'm not the monster the Pax thought I was. I'm something new, something that was born from the ashes of everything that came before." I reached out, and my hand found his, and I felt his fingers close around mine. "I'm the future," I said. "And the future doesn't need more blood. It needs something better." He looked at me for a long, long moment, and then he smiled a real smile, a smile that reached his eyes, a smile that made my heart ache with a joy I had never felt before. "Something better," he said. "I like that." He pulled me close, and his arms wrapped around me, and I let myself be held, let myself be safe, let myself be home. "I love you," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I've loved you since the moment I found you in that clearing. I've loved you since before I knew your name. I've loved you for 300 years, and I will love you for 300 more, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving to you that you are worth loving." I looked up at him, at the king of the lichens, at the monster of 1,000 stories, at the man who had searched for me for 300 years and had never given up hope. "I love you too," I said. "I love you for seeing me when no one else did, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for giving me a home when I had nothing." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and I kissed him back, and in that moment, the past fell away and the future began. I am not the girl who was tied to a tree. I am not the omega. I am not the defect. I am not the nothing they thought I was. I am the last female lichen, the hope of the fallen, the future that was buried for 500 years and has finally risen. And I am here to tell you something that took me 20 years to learn. You are not what they told you you were. They will try to define you. They will try to limit you. They will try to make you small, to make you quiet, to make you believe that you are less than what you are. They will tie you to trees and leave you to die, not because you are weak, but because they are afraid of what you might become. Do not let them. Do not let them tell you who you are. Do not let them decide what you can be. Do not let them bury your truth, your power, yourself in the ground where they think it belongs. You are not a defect. You are not a mistake. You are not something to be tolerated or discarded or used. You are a revelation. You are the thing they didn't see coming. You are the power they tried to suppress. You are the future that is rising from the ashes of everything that came before. And when they come for you, and they will come for you, because the world is full of Declans who would rather destroy than admit they were wrong, you will rise to meet them. Not with their hatred, not with their violence, not with the same weapons they used to try to destroy you, but with something better, with truth, with power, with the unshakable knowledge that you are exactly what you are always meant to be. You are not the girl they threw away. You are the woman who will decide the fate of them all. The end. This story is over, but yours is just beginning. If Zarya's journey spoke to you, if you felt that fire in your chest, that need to rise, that refusal to be defined by the people who try to keep you small, then you need to do something right now. Asterisk like this story. Let me know it meant something to you. Let me know you were here, that you felt it, that it changed something in you. Asterisk share it with someone who needs to read it. Someone who's been told they're too much or not enough. Someone who's been tied to a tree by people who were afraid of what they could become. Asterisk subscribe to follow my work, because this is not the last story I'm going to tell. There are more worlds to build, more truths to uncover, more women who are going to rise from the ashes and become exactly what they were always meant to be. And I want you to be there for every single one. Thank you for reading. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for being here. Now go be the revelation the world didn't see coming. The end.